Alright guys, where to buy in 2025, the ever-changing Australian property market. So we'll go through some quote-unquote hotspots and then the principal place of residence versus rent vesting for Sydney or Melbourne property investors. I think that's probably pretty important to think about because in a lot of ways they're kind of in a better position, Sydney and Melbourne, because they can really look elsewhere and really focus on the investment potential rather than having to live in it. So we'll speak about that and just kind of a general overview, I guess. What is to be said at this point in time is probably very different to what's going to be said in a year from now. It's always changing. That's why I think these hotspot it's a bit of a myth, as it's always changing. Every capital city has its turn, but there's still things to consider. So let's get into it. Let me just move me here. So hot and cold spots. So Brisbane's still going strong, but as you've probably seen, it requires probably at least a 650K to get a quality property with the growth it has had in the past few years. So a few years ago, 5 years ago, you could probably get an outstanding property for 500K, but that property now is probably, you need 650, 700, 750 to get that same quality property. So I do see Brisbane kind of plateauing soon, because it seems to be that the affordability is driving the prices. Hence why Perth is accelerating right now at a rapid rate, because the affordability, you can still get a really good property for like 500, 550. And then I guess it'll rise to that point where you can't get a property of, that caliber for 650 to 700, and then it'll switch to another city. That seems to be kind of what happens. Yeah, so Perth continues to rise in value. When will it settle? Yeah, we don't really know, I guess. How long's a piece of string? But I guess that would be my guess, is when no longer those properties that are really, really good on a good quality block, good size block, good quality old brick homes can no longer get the price of like 650, 700. I'll probably see it changing. So hopefully still not for a year or two, but you never know what could happen. Could happen with COVID, and then everything could be flipped on its head. But yeah, okay. So Victorian prices remain stagnant with increased stamp duty and land tax. So obviously the increased stamp duty and land tax is deterring investors. So as I predicted, the prices remain very, very stagnant in that area. So yeah, look, principal place of residence in Victoria is fine, but if you're looking to invest, I really would be looking elsewhere. I really, really would. Not to say that places can't have exceptional growth, because of course they can, but it's just probably increased risk when it's not really necessary, I think. Hopefully they're going to come down, these stamp duties and land tax, they say, hopefully at the end of this year. At the middle of this year. But we'll see what happens. So Adelaide seems to be the capital city where you can buy the highest quality asset at the cheapest price. Expect this to drive capital growth in this area. Yeah, I do see Adelaide doing very well in the coming years. You can probably get a really quality property for like in the 400s, where you could do that a year or two ago in Perth, but not now. And then Adelaide is still probably, you can still get a really good property for like 480. So I do see probably Adelaide having a really good next couple of years, and perhaps being the next Perth. I think Brisbane will die off, and then Adelaide will keep going. Adelaide will pick up as well. So that's kind of my predictions. But hey, who knows? Yeah, so I see affordability driving prices in the coming years, which I just spoke about with Perth and Adelaide. That's kind of what I see happening. Okay, principal place of residence versus rent vesting for Sydney or Melbourne property investors. I wanted to speak about this just because I was speaking to a lady a while ago, or like last week, and she wants to buy a principal place of residence for like 1.4 million in Sydney. And the thing when you purchase a property for that price is that when you rent it out, your yield is terrible. You cannot, so for a 500K property, you can rent it out for say 600 a week, which is exceptionally good. But when you buy a property for $1 million, there is no way that you can get a 1,200 per week rent. Do you see what I'm saying? It dies as the price goes up, the yield drops off. That's why property investors are buying blue chip properties across Australia for cheap, because the yields are so much better. So once you start to push your budget out to that huge price, of like 1 million plus, your yields just go out the window, and it's a terrible investment because you can't, when you rent it out eventually, you can't keep up the repayments because you've got to keep topping it up and topping it up and topping it up. Where if you get these properties that are a lot cheaper, they can basically cover your mortgage depending on what the interest rates are doing. But yeah, I think that's something to really consider if you're in Sydney and Melbourne. I think rent vesting really is the future, where you just rent where you live, rent where you want to live, and then you purchase elsewhere and hopefully get your mortgage repayments, covered, or maybe you have to cover a little bit, and then it's just really getting that compounding growth, and you can benefit that way. So I think, yeah, for Melbourne or Sydney, that's something you really need to consider when you're living in those areas that require $1 million plus. Think about, what are you going to do when you want to rent it out and you want to purchase again? Do you want to be a property investor, or do you just want to buy, a principal place of residence and just pay it off? It depends what you want to do. What's your goal? If you want to be able to cover your mortgage repayments or costs, consider looking elsewhere. If you want to be successful in property, consider buying in cheaper capital cities and renting where you want to live. I do think that's probably a good option. What about if you just purchase, 1, 2, 3 properties perhaps, and in 10 years' time, then you've got enough equity to purchase, you could purchase for 50% deposit, you could purchase your dream home. These are all things to consider. I think if you're, a young first home buyer, you're living in a city, Melbourne or Sydney, I would really be looking to purchase elsewhere. Otherwise, you're going to get an apartment, or you're going to really stretch your budget and the yield is going to go out the window. So yeah, something to consider if you live in either Sydney or Melbourne, but I just kind of wanted to, touch on that. I guess that's kind of everything. Just a little bit of an overview of where we're sitting, things to consider in 2025. Good luck out there, guys. I'll put a link to book in a call if you want some help. Just a 15-minute chat with me. We can have a chat about, your goals and where you want to go in property. Cool. Thanks, guys.